This is CBC Vancouver News.
Little heroes.
I heard the little girl say, "My sister's drowning."
It's how 3 young, quick-thinking boys saved a Kootenay toddler from drowning. Also, backing down.
We will build the best and most accountable police department we can.
A turning point for Surrey's mayor as the city moves forward with transitioning to a local police force. And a backyard blaze. Cautions on how cigarettes can ignite fires even after being put out. Good evening, I'm Baneet Braich. Dan is away. We begin tonight with a fire in the Mount Pleasant area of Vancouver. The Vancouver Fire Chief says multiple rescues were made by firefighters at an apartment building, and this is an active incident. Heavy plumes of smoke could be seen in the area, and residents are reporting they've also lost power. BC Hydro reports there is an outage in the area affecting over 2,000 customers.
And I ran up to the 3rd floor and I saw all the smoke. Banging on the door, telling them, "Get the hell out of here now."
It's not yet clear what caused the blaze or if and how many people have been injured. And in Richmond, police say a shooting has left 1 man dead this evening. Richmond RCMP and IHIT are investigating. The shooting happened at 5:45 p.m. at the 8000 block of Milner Road. Police say they found the man critically injured and tried to save his life, but he died on scene. About 10 minutes later, a vehicle was found fully engulfed in flames in the 1200 block of Blundell Road. Police say they are still figuring out if the vehicle is associated to the shooting, and the area is blocked off as police investigate. Anyone with information is asked to contact IHIT. And today, some major kudos for 2 boys and their dad. They're being applauded for saving the life of a 3-year-old girl when she nearly drowned. As CBC's Corey Bullock reports, a normal beach day turned into an emergency.
What started as a day of fun on the beach quickly turned into a startling scene for a group of young boys.
There's this little sand spot that goes out really far, and we went to go like halfway, and then we saw these 2 boys and a girl. They were all crying, and I heard the little girl say, "My sister's drowning," so I told these 2, my brother and my friend, to go get my dad and his dad.
His dad, Chris Pearson, credits the boys with saving the toddler's life.
If it wasn't for those kids, this would be a different story.
This guy came running and dived in to get the girl. He didn't have much gas left, so my dad and his dad were already swimming there, and they helped them out of them. They just kept passing the girl until they got to shore, and his dad did CPR.
That's when things took a turn.
Later down on the wet sand, and instantly Jason started doing compressions and mouth-to-mouth, and I think he did that for about 5 minutes, and all of a sudden she started gurgling and coughing up a huge amount of water and seaweed, and then eventually her nose started bleeding and there was blood, and then she started crying, and everybody was pretty happy.
According to a report from the BC Coroner's Service, there were 86 accidental drowning deaths in BC last year. Luckily, the toddler was taken to hospital and is now in stable condition, according to the RCMP. But Pearson says it's a stark reminder of water safety.
We all think Wausau is a pretty safe little lake, and in a matter of minutes, things can change.
And now the boys and their fathers are being praised for their efforts. Well, the police said you guys really helped save her life. How do you feel about that?
Happy.
A happy ending, indeed. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
And Surrey's police force saga finally appears to be ending. Mayor Brenda Locke seems to have relented and is moving forward with the transition to a regional force. It comes after Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth gave his final decision last week. And as Mira Baines reports, the mayor addressed a tense Surrey Police Board meeting last night.
In what seems like a turning point in the public debate on Surrey policing, Mayor Brenda Locke delivered a statement to the Surrey Police Board last night.
It is my goal that given these challenging circumstances, we will build the best and most accountable police department we can.
Locke campaigned on the promise to go back to the RCMP force, and the issue has been contentious. Yesterday, she set the tone as the city moves forward with the SPS.
To date, this board has made it a deliberate position that they build a wall and even offend the city of Surrey through their work. That posturing must stop today.
The mayor's office confirmed she will be meeting with the province's appointed strategic implementation advisor next week. Former BC Hydro CEO Jessica McDonald will be taking on the role. The Surrey Police Service says the force is preparing for more hiring.
The recruiting section now is on standby, ready to ramp up once we have a plan together with the 3 levels of government, the RCMP, and then we'll be able to move forward.
SPS confirmed it will also be meeting with McDonald on next steps. Locke has said a big issue is the cost of a city police force. An independent cost analysis commissioned by the province shows a municipal police force will cost the city $30 million more per year than the RCMP would. The province has said it will still provide $150 million to the city to help with policing costs. So far, the city says the extra costs for having both the RCMP and SPS operating is $8 million a month. About $60 million in extra money since December, when the city decided to transition back to the RCMP. Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth met with Locke earlier this week. In a statement, he said, "Mayor Locke and I had a frank discussion that was respectful and productive. Now that the decision has been made, I am hopeful that we will find a way to move forward together." Mayor Locke has not held a news conference since the province's final decision, and it appears the transition to SPS is back on. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
North Vancouver Fire and Rescue is warning the public about the improper disposal of cigarettes. The district shared this video of a worker putting out a cigarette in a backyard where he was working. And 6 hours later, just watch what happens. The cigarette starts a spark, and in just a few minutes, the hedge is on fire. The residents of the house did everything they could to put out the flames and called 911. North Vancouver Fire says, while you may think you threw away a cigarette safely, there's a huge risk of fire if it's near vegetation. Well, it's been a dry and hot spring followed by a dry and hot summer, and that has led to significant drought conditions across the province. Joel Ballard joins us now for more on this. So, Joel, we know the situation is dire, but how does it compare to past years?
Well, if you take a look at the current drought map for BC, 23 of BC's 34 regions are in drought level 4 of 5, where adverse effects are likely or almost certain. But if you look at last year's map for July 15th, it paints a much different picture. Drought wasn't even an issue. Even that small patch of yellow is only drought level 1. Now let's look at the same day in 2021. The drought conditions, far worse than 2022, but nowhere near as bad as what we're seeing right now. And it's important to note that the province considered 2021 a very bad year for drought. Fortunately, we did have some rain this week.
It will provide some temporary relief for flows, but not necessarily long-term lasting. If we were to get 2 to 3 more of those events, especially province-wide, we may be able to get out of the drought, but typically that's not what happens at this time of year.
And the forecast confirms that, with more warm, dry weather on the way.
And Joel, we've heard a lot about the immediate impacts of this drought, but what could it mean for the province in the long term?
Well, the answer is unclear. The province has warned that these conditions are unprecedented. It doesn't have past data to use as a magic 8-ball. And unfortunately, this drought appears to have legs.
It is possible for the drought conditions to carry through the fall and winter into the next year if we don't see the level of rainfall that we need, particularly in the fall.
I had the chance to speak with Sean Smuckler from UBC's Centre for Sustainable Food Systems. He says the impacts of the drought could be widespread and lasting. We're already seeing how the agriculture sector has been hit. The industry requires lots of water. Ranchers can't grow or source enough feed and hay and are having to sell or shrink their herds. But also, he says, urban life depends on steady access to water. And then there's wildlife and the impacts of drought on natural habitats, like low-flowing streams and rivers, and how that could challenge crucial species like salmon. He says the current conditions should serve as a wake-up call.
These are conditions that have been predicted by climate scientists for decades now. And so hopefully this is just a glimpse of what's coming in the future, and that we can start to adapt. We have time to really adjust our production systems, our infrastructure, our policies to create a more resilient system.
For now, of course, the message from the province remains the same, with calls for residents and businesses to reduce and limit their water use.
Thanks, Joel. And several wildfires are still threatening communities despite the rain. BC Wildfire Service says there are 394 active wildfires, down by roughly 100 since Monday. Nearly half of those are in the Prince George Fire region, and almost all were caused by lightning. Emergency Management and Climate Readiness Minister Bowen Ma is urging people to be prepared in case they have to evacuate their homes. And Vancouver Fire and Rescue has suspended all burn and explosive permits due to the dry weather conditions. This means, with the exception of the celebration of light, no fireworks are permitted in the city. So don't expect the usual post-game show if you're heading to see the Vancouver Canadians on Saturday. And with all the recent troubles BC Ferries has experienced over the previous weeks, many were frustrated. Yasmin Gandam spoke with the mayor of Nanaimo on the cascading impacts for the island.
With cancellation, website difficulties, and one of their vessels being out of commission, one person who is watching all of this closely is the mayor of Nanaimo, Leonard Krogh. Well, when you see these issues with BC Ferries, I mean, what goes through your mind?
There's a pretty high level of frustration and angst. Look, everything within reason that most of us consume on Vancouver Island by way of food, the furniture we buy, whatever, is coming by ferry. It's being trucked to Vancouver Island. And so when the ferries are not reliable, we're the ones on the receiving end, so to speak.
What kind of impact does this have on your community when there are delays and cancellations like this?
Well, it obviously leads to potential short-term shortages, depending on what's being delivered, if it's groceries, vegetables, etc. For people who are waiting for delivery of goods that they've ordered or are hoping to purchase in local stores.
While we have you here, another travel issue affecting your community is the road closures on Highway 4. What are you hearing about that?
Well, obviously, it's been extremely stressful for people who have family and a strong need to get to Port Alberni and to the West Coast generally. But what it points out is something that I've been emphasizing ever since the fire started. We have an existing rail line on Vancouver Island. This points out that if that rail line was active and available, you would be able to transport goods and people into Alberni to the West Coast very easily along the rail line as an alternate route, as opposed to expecting people to travel for hours on what were essentially logging roads.
It gave her so much body awareness and strength and speed and just utilities for her to move forward.
And after the break, how a Port Alberni softball player made her way to the North American Indigenous Games from a completely different sport. Find out which when we come back. And thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. The Rabona, an uncommon and tricky soccer move that makes fans go crazy, could have a moment at this month's FIFA Women's World Cup. So how does it work? We turn to the Calgary Foothills Soccer Club for a breakdown.
Rabona. 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 Hi, I'm Sarah Kinsner, and I'm a midfielder for the Foothills WFC team. I'm going to be demonstrating the Rabona. What you do is you basically hook your one leg around the other and kick the ball. What you want to do is you want to take your touch, and in this case, since I'm right foot dominant, I'm going to be planting and swinging my right leg around the ball. So when you approach the ball and you plant, you want to swing that leg around, and you kind of want to angle your foot so you end up hitting it with the laces of your foot as you come through. So you would kind of be deceiving, where you would take your touch in the opposite direction of what you would normally kick with, and then you'd plant and kick the ball. I think it's just kind of tricky. Not a lot of people do it during the games, so people would expect you to just pass with your dominant foot for the most part, but it really catches defenders off guard when you just do this sneaky pass without them realizing. Usually you definitely hear a little like oohs and like, ah, like did you see that type of reaction. And I think it also adds a little flair for the fans because they also don't see it too often, so I think it's just a really fun move. It can be a little tricky. People tell me that I can do it because I have a little bit longer legs, but I think anyone can do it. I'm so excited to watch Team Canada play. I think they are in a great group. I think they'll do really well in the tournament. Definitely Jessie Fleming. I feel like she's always been so inspiring to me, and it's always nice watching her do her thing out there.
It's Jessie Fleming who scores the goal!
It's so fun to watch so many players that I've played with growing up as well, going to some of the youth camps and stuff, so it's just so inspiring to see those girls play at the highest level. And hopefully they'll see a few Rabona moves maybe tossed into the tournament. And one last story of success from the recent North American Indigenous Games in Halifax. Wamish Hamilton introduces us to a Port Alberni softball player who made her way to the diamond from a very different sport.
The North American Indigenous Games might be wrapped and done for 2023, but one athlete is going to keep treasuring the memories made all summer long. 13-year-old Jamie Lee Lucas traveled to Halifax from Port Alberni and met a lot of people who needed a map to find out where she's from.
She might be from a small town that a lot of people don't recognize on a map, but she is on even playing field for the skills that she has and the determination that she's built for a love of a sport that she's built on herself.
Jamie Lee was one of several hundred BC athletes competing in the North American Indigenous Games. Amongst the youngest on her team, she played second base in the softball team. And while the ball game was old hand for her teammates, for Jamie Lee, it was a far cry from her original passion, gymnastics. But her gym moves played a part on the softball diamond.
I got to compete with a lot of people, and it helped me a lot with softball because I felt like flexibility really helped.
Jamie Lee showed she was a talented gymnast when she was just 4 years old. As she advanced in that sport, the higher she went, the fewer Indigenous people she saw.
I was the only one who was First Nations.
And so she decided to leave gymnastics and move to a sport more familiar to those around her.
Everyone in my family does it, and I loved watching it. Softball was just something that I really wanted to get better at.
Jamie Lee grew up watching her cousins take to the softball field, so she thought she'd give it a go. Her new sport fit like a comfy softball mitt, and she found a sense of belonging. But all that gymnastics training wasn't for naught.
She loves the sport, so you put all those things together with her core of the body strength that she received from her gymnastics. So it's pretty awesome to see, and it's pretty good feeling to watch her do what she does out there.
Team BC won bronze in the U16 girls division in Halifax. The next games are in Calgary in 2027. And Jamie Lee plans to be there.
I can get emotional at times because we think of her great-grandparents that have passed on, you know, and the things that they fought for our people to be able to do this. So for our daughter to be a part of something that generations before us could not do and fought for our kids to do, you just know, you know, it's a really good feeling.
Wamish Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
And here's a live shot of all the smoke from that fire in Mount Pleasant. You can see it's still going. Darius Madavi will have your full forecast next.
BC landlords will soon be able to evict any tenant without cause, and within a year they'll be able to raise rents by any amount they want. Those are provisions in the legislation that accompanied a new restraint budget brought in last week by Premier Bill Bennett. And as Georges Tremel reports, the tenants of BC are mobilizing for a fight.
He bumped it up here, so now it's $5.50. At the offices of the Consumers Association of Canada, renters were already phoning this morning about being hit by rent increases. And on another phone, this worker was rallying the troops to coordinate the counterattack.
Sharing some discussion about the implications of the recent budget. As a result of the budget, it looks as though it's more a ministry of corporate affairs than it is consumer affairs.
Yvonne Miles calls the budget and bills that followed Hurricane Bennett.
The measures in the budget have implications that are so far-reaching and so devastating that they can't. I think the generous thing for me to say is that they weren't fully thought out.
Who wants to live with wage controls for 10 years like we lived with rent controls for 10 years? That was the problem.
Jack Hayes says rent increases will not be huge because the vacancy rate is presently high in British Columbia. But even the landlords are concerned about the possible eviction of renters without cause. One fear is that the court system, already clogged, will not be able to handle all the disputes between landlords and tenants.
We did not make that recommendation. We were desperately anxious to get out of rent control and the red tape that went with it. Desperately anxious.
I think it's revenge. It's the only thing that I can think of.
Tom Lalonde of the Greater Vancouver Renters Association could not believe his eyes when he read the bill.
And I think what this bill does is to throw that into utter chaos. They're going to be put at odds ends, and it's adding fuel to the fire. And I think that we could actually see, if you want to call it, a form of anarchy.
It seems both landlords and tenants do not want to go as far as Bill Bennett does. They may even get together to try to change his mind about the new bill. Georges Tremel, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
We awarded British Columbia's best small town. This summer, we're making a splash. It's the search for BC's best lake. Vote at cbc.ca/bestlakebc. And on August 6th, join the CBC Vancouver team at the 45th Annual Vancouver Pride Parade. The fun continues on at the Pride Festival. Make sure you drop by the CBC Vancouver tent and win some CBC swag.
A Kamloops woman is the province's newest multi-millionaire. She's a lucky winner of half of this month's Lotto Max jackpot. Rhonda Milescu says she purchased the lucky ticket worth $35 million at her local Walmart, and she hopes to use the windfall to design her dream home.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Well, it's time for a BC-wide weather forecast. Darius Madavi joins us now. Darius, I'm missing the rain. What can we expect for fire danger?
I miss the rain too. We can see what an impact it had yesterday when all of this was much greener and bluer. We're still pretty similar to yesterday in most places, but you can see the island is already turning back to the orange and yellow hues that it was earlier this last week. But we can see what an impact rain really has as we start to dry out again. We see these already changing back. Fire danger is very movable, as we've talked about. Now, if we talk about what we saw earlier today, we did see high temperatures start to come back up, especially in the south. The southern interior has really rebounded from those well below seasonal temperatures we saw earlier this week, and they're back up around seasonal as of today. Looks like tomorrow they'll climb a little bit more even, so back up to a little bit above seasonal, but really nothing like what we saw earlier this month. Now, as we look at the weather systems that we had earlier today moving through the province, this high pressure system is really the only thing we have really controlling what weather is happening throughout the province. Remember yesterday we had that low pressure system over Alberta? Well, a lot of this moisture that's moving through the province is a result of that low pressure system, but without the system in place, it's become very disorganized. So it's hard to tell exactly where those systems will move into tomorrow. But we can expect plenty of rain in the central parts of the province, possibly as far south as Kamloops, while the northeast remains fairly dry because this high pressure system will keep moving further west and keeping those parts of the province dry. So here we see some of that moisture move through again, potentially as far south as Kamloops even, but mostly in a slightly more central, southern central part of the province. As we move into the weekend, a lot of those showers start to fall off and then return once again in the afternoon and then again the following day. If we look at what temperatures we can expect tomorrow, mostly pretty similar to today. Again, southern interior coming up a little bit, but just mostly rain along the coast. A lot of it is very isolated showers, so not too much to worry about. And then in Vancouver, again, nothing but sun in the forecast ahead and pretty warm in inland tomorrow.
So I guess some sunny skies and some more rain ahead. Thanks so much.
Of course.
And that is your late news for Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC, and that starts tomorrow. Thank you. Good night.